This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Okay.
So,
you can
so Diane,
save
why
it
don't
as
you
a
just give us
PDF
a little bit
and
of
upload
background?
it.
So, for you folks, Kate, you were part of
Sure.
the MVP planning process, I think, 3, 4 years ago, actually, with I think it would have been with Diane's colleague Julie, who ran that
Yes.
for us. So, we did do the MVP
Right.
planning process, probably in, I don't know, 21, I think it is. Hi,
21,
Christopher.
yeah.
Welcome.
It feels like a million years ago, to be honest.
Yeah,
Nice to meet you.
well,
Sure.
it is, I'm sure. So anyway,
Yeah.
so we wanted to just, we were getting a little bit, feeling like a little bit of going in circles here, and we wanted to, reach out and just see if you guys had any advice. So thank you for being available on short notice and chiming in.
Yeah.
So maybe just give us a brief background of the two of you and where you think you can help us here.
Sure. Yeah, happy to do that. So good to meet you all. And Julie had kind of briefed me a little bit on this and what you were thinking about doing. So my name's Diane Moss. I'm the Chief Resilience and Sustainability Officer at Fuston O'Neill. So I work with a lot of different types of clients on different types of projects related to climate resilience and sustainability. Both on the adaptation side and also decarbonization and kind of working on those goals as well. So I've worked on, gosh, I don't even know how many MVP grants at this point over the last, what's it now? Almost 8 years since they started.
Oh, wow. Okay.
With communities, across the state, different types of projects, different types of focus. I have a particular interest in my background in things that are related to health. I'm a registered environmental health specialist, registered sanitarian, as well as an environmental engineer. So things related to heat and health are particularly up my alley.
Great. You and Kate will be talking the same language as a registered
right.
nurse.
Oh, awesome.
I'm on the Board of Health in Southampton as well. So I'm
perfect.
also interested in
that's
heating
great.
and cooling and effects of heat and air quality on health.
Yeah, that's terrific. And I think I'll just mention before I turn it over to Chris to tell you a little bit about himself that what we have been sort of hearing and sensing is that there is a particular focus on heat for MVP. They identified several heat equity communities within the state this past year, and it's a growing area of interest. I think we've largely ignored a lot in the Northeast, but now have, obviously are starting to pay more attention to. So I think your application is well timed in that sense. And of course, I believe because you're a rural community, you have no match this year, which
Correct.
is awesome.
Yeah, we're on that list. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really terrific news. So that's just a little bit about about me. Chris, I'll turn it over to you. You can share a little bit about you and also some of the types of projects you're working on.
Yeah. So, hi everybody. I'm Christopher Wilk. I am a mechanical engineer. I'm licensed in Massachusetts, Maine, and Connecticut, and pending Vermont right now. So, mechanical engineer specializing at HVAC, so heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So, work on all types of projects where the HVAC equipment is the specialty of the project, and especially for decarbonization and upgraded heat pumps, indoor air quality problems, and everything in the realm of MEP engineering, particularly with that HVAC. So we are doing a lot of work for upgrading the heat pumps, using it for decommissioning older gas systems, and also doing work for schools as well, assessing their HVAC systems. A lot of them are over 20 years old right now. They have been upgraded from their original construction from the 50s and 60s. So I see no different with a school as well. So that's kind of my background where we are.
Well, you kind of walked into this one, Christopher, because we're probably in that same age group of a school that's built in the 50s. So yeah.
And that is so exciting to have you on this call. Wow, I really feel like we as town volunteers often are trying to figure out the best language and best way to approach problems, and without that engineering expertise. And then we're trying to pull in people from the school. Chris is really good at reaching out to different folks who might provide their limited snippet of their involvement in a particular situation when,
Yeah.
it's almost like we don't know the questions to ask a lot of the time, at least from my perspective. Like, what do we even need to know to figure out this problem? So it's so great to have you here.
Yeah, no, very good. Yeah. Bruce, you want to say a couple words?
Yeah, I'm very happy to have you guys here. And there's actually 3 nurses. I was a nurse before I became a PA.
That's right. I forgot.
And certainly, Chris, your HVAC experience is key to this issue that we're trying to deal with. But I'm glad to have your help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. All right, guys. Well, why don't we get at it so we can maximize your time? I think I'd just like to start out with 2 overarching questions, and then we might go down into the basic questions from the nature-based solutions on down into the environmental justice and community engagement in particular, just to, figure that out. So we've been tossing around, we're thinking, or I'm thinking, I'll put it on myself, I'm thinking cooling center, but we think we probably need to say heating and cooling center. Just wanted to verify that that's the right way to be phrasing this throughout the whole document.
Yeah, so it depends on really what is required, because heating is required in all homes by code, but cooling is luxury, which, in my opinion, it's not. It shouldn't be just a luxury product. So you could add heating center as well, but I'm sure the school has a heating system. I know that the boiler is kind of towards the end.
Yeah, they've got a terrible boiler, pneumatic. A boiler with a pneumatic system that's definitely not efficient at all. Yeah.
So I think the reason that I wanted to ask whether heating should be included is more because it also speaks to the need for power. Because when I first moved into Southampton, this was 2011, which feels like a million years ago, we lost power for 10 days. And so while heat is required per code, I was more thinking about a vulnerability in terms of severe weather events, if there's a natural disaster, like having some sort of redundant power within the school system that would be able to address if a lot of town residents lose power. And in that particular instance, I really did think about our aging population, like our particularly vulnerable population. And a third of our town pretty much is over the age of 60. So, thinking about the intention of this initial MVP process, when we were talking about what are we going to anticipate, the severe weather, the maybe microbursts. Those were some of the things that we were talking about as our vulnerabilities. And then you see a microburst that happened in the town over from us. And I just imagine how that might have a pretty significant impact on our power infrastructure at some point.
Mm-hmm.
If I could also add to that, I wondered whether the question of heating may be redundant, because for this application, Chris, do you think we'd be using mini splits, and mini splits by default come with heat and cooling integrated? And does it add or detract to even talk about heat? Whereas the MVP and the climate change models and everything talk more about the heat extremes that we're going to be facing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if it's heat extremes, I'd say particularly in the summer, maybe focus just on the cooling center aspect of it, if that was, kind of the anticipated need here. So you're saying that there's a couple of units, so cafeteria, gymnasium, library, I don't know if those are the specific rooms that they are currently heat only, and they would want to add cooling to the system to provide a center for in extreme heat conditions. People can go there and have some air conditioning.
Right. Right now, there is only AC in the office and the library at the school. So we're particularly looking at what we're calling the cafetorium, which is different from the gymnasium. But it's where we have our town meetings. It's a very large space. I forget. I sent you the square footage on it. I forget what it was now. I'm thinking is it 5? Oh gosh, I can't remember. Anyway, it was
Yeah.
in one of my emails yesterday.
So
So
the cafeteria is 5,160 square
there we
feet.
go. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I believe it's got upper level. It's all one level, but up toward the ceiling, there's large windows, and then we do have shades on those right now. But that's
Mhm.
the extent really of the cooling in there.
And then
Um,
what's the heating source? Is it just baseboard from the boiler?
yeah,
Or
I think it's just
okay,
from the boiler, as far as I know. Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
So in terms of such a large space, in our recommendations, this is going to be well past the capacity for mini splits, which you see in a residential house. You're going to be up 10 to 15 tons of cooling. It would be a significant cooling project with quite high, depending on how you're looking at it, quite high construction costs where a unit itself could be around $90,000 for adding enough sufficient cooling for the internal load of the space. Because it's not just keeping that space cool, it's for the use for per building code of a cafetorium. It's supposed to have a bunch of people in it. So that triggers ventilation requirements.
yeah.
And you're bringing in outdoor air. You also need to further cool that outdoor air based on how many people you anticipate using the space, as well as this is for the hottest days of the year. So it's going to require the most amount of cooling. There's going to be energy losses through your envelope and everything like that. So it's quite a significant amount of cooling
Yeah.
that you would need for this space. And looking at the school, it seems like that there are rooftop units there. So if it is in fact where it's like there's no ceiling diffusers, you said that it's like an open skylight, correct?
No, it's not a skylight. It's just windows up at the upper
Windows.
level around the walls.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
So we would also perform heating and cooling load calculations to determine an approximate size of
yeah,
the space and how much cooling you would actually need. And then with that, also address indoor air quality and ventilation concerns, having upgraded filtration.
yeah.
There's probably minimal ventilation right there right now.
Well, there has been, but I think, and this is, I need to go back and find out, but during COVID, I know the school purchased all those special filters that they needed to purchase those air filters
Yeah.
that were, really required, I think. And they went above and beyond, I think, in terms of the quality of air filters they got. What status they are in now, I have no idea, but I know that they had done some upgrading of those, of the air quality standards, during COVID. But are you saying, Christopher, that maybe we've got too big a room to try to work with? I mean, should we be looking
I mean,
for?
it's not too big of a room. It's just being able to keep it at 75 degrees in there in the heat
Yeah.
in the dead of summer. You could
Uh-huh.
use mini splits. It's just going to have an electrical
Right.
demand. It'll still be heat pumped, so it can provide heating. Say if you
Yeah.
place a bunch of wall-mounted mini splits all around, you could have, you might have 5 to 7 separate heat pumps
Yeah.
serving that space to actually keep it as cold as you want. But
Yeah.
for a large space like this, it is significant amounts of cooling.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I guess that's what the feasibility study would tell us as to
Yeah.
what's really realistic in terms of both the technology as well as the cost implications of it. I will
Yeah.
just say that probably, in my time back around here, we've had maybe 200 adults in that room for town meetings. And so I'd say maybe the capacity would be double that. I'd say, and then we've got about 500 little kids at the school. So we're somewhere probably in that. I'm just going to guess the 500 number in terms of people that we would want to try to accommodate or something in that space. I don't know,
Yeah.
as a maximum, I would think, but that may depend on building code too. I don't know. That room probably has a per person limit, which I haven't checked with the building commissioner
Yeah.
yet. But anyway, so
I think
okay,
the other challenge is we don't have a lot of community spaces. It's not like we have the senior
No.
center, we have the school, so there's not a lot of options. There's the
Yeah.
town hall. So in terms of like available space, it's
Yeah.
not like we have an abundance of options. And also like you have to think about the use of the space even during like a heat event, right? Like the
Right.
school would probably be ideal because the school's closed in the summer. So
Right.
Yeah. So if I could just chime in a couple of considerations, I think I would, if it were me, I would stick with calling it sort of cooling and maybe even cooling and air quality center because there's more of a
Mhm.
focus on that kind of at the federal level about talking about, kind of increased wildfire risk and potential
Mm-hmm.
for, air quality, which of course with the vulnerable populations you're talking about would, directly align. You could, of course, and mention the potential for positive health effects from extreme storms and power outages. You check that off in your, in your application, and that could sort of incorporate the warming center or the, kind of the heat resilience piece of it. Because I mean, to your point, more people actually do die of cold weather incidents than they do, of heat, although heat is a major, can also be a major, obviously a major risk. So, but I think I would stick from almost from a, I don't want to say a branding perspective for the application, but
Mm-hmm.
essentially
Yeah.
for a branding perspective, I would either call it a cooling center or a cooling and air quality center. I think that would kind of um, catch the eye, if you will, of the MVP folks. Um, I wonder too, Chris, like Chris Wilk, what about the feasibility of expand, like sort of the school wide system of expanding cooling? Because I ask this because sometimes, there's sort of mixed results on cooling centers. I mean, the big challenge with cooling centers is getting people to actually go to cooling centers. It always feels like there needs to be something more there to draw them. So I know you have this large space, and that's always a possibility, but there could be a feasibility of using actually smaller spaces within the school, smaller classrooms where maybe people are doing particular activities that draw them to the cooling center, a place for people who I don't know, are interested in some sort of craft activity or people who are interested in, people with kids who are interested in being in a space. So I wonder if that's a feasibility
Hmm.
that could be addressed as an alternative to Chris Wilk. I don't know.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Maybe we leave it open.
Yeah.
yeah, certain classrooms as well. We can take a look at the whole
Yeah.
system that you have.
Yeah. And I think this came down into just the project summary, and I think that may go into one of the goals that we had at one point, and I don't know if it may have gotten rephrased here, but so we'll knock this one out here for a minute while I'm doing it.
And Chris, I can go through that too, like
Yeah, no, we will.
changes to cooling and air.
Um,
And I think
so
removing
this was
cafeteria.
right. So this was basically the project summary, but then they wanted the top three goals as well. So this was um, right here going in with a preconceived notion, I guess, of looking at the cafeteria and determining about how to upgrade that. And then um, there had been, I think, one of our other ones, and I hate that the format of this just went all over the place. Hang on, then engage the committee. Okay, so I think Bruce, you had said that identify, you know, which areas of the school would be appropriate. So it's not just focusing on the cafeteria, right? So we probably need to just go back and, make that, and other areas or
Yeah.
something, to broaden
Yeah.
that, like
Little,
you had suggested at one point. That might be the
little more
way to do
generic.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
or
love
expand
that.
to a couple classrooms where mini
Right.
splits would suffice for
Yeah.
Okay.
having spaces in there for cost,
And
restrictions.
under
Yeah.
your last bullet there about uh community to build capacity for climate resilience strategies, you know, that's a place where potentially you could focus very more specifically on sort of the heat resilience for people, kind of like self-education, getting kids to, recognize that they need to take breaks, get in shade, drink water, helping people to understand sort of signs of of heat related illness coming on. So those might be some things, and that could also tie into your community engagement. The thing that's always hard for communities, especially small communities or small rural communities, is the community engagement,
Mhm.
piece, coming up with stuff that's meaningful and helpful, and as well as the priority populations, EJ. part as well.
As part of this, we could also do education in collaboration with the Public Health Excellence Northampton program to do some, like have their public health nurse to come out and do a talk about recognition of signs of heat stroke or heat exhaustion.
Yeah, that'd be great. That fits into that whole partnership question too, which is even better.
Yeah.
All right.
If you have training with like Parks and Rec too, like training for, for coaches and, players and parents, that's useful. In a lot of communities, we're seeing that if firefighters do visits to schools or to senior centers, that they're great, trusted partners to talk about this. So that's another, relatively, usually pretty easy partnership.
Yeah, our fire department does get out and do those kinds of things, and they've done some CPR awareness and various other things at the senior center, for example.
Yeah, that's great.
So let me scoot down, and then we'll just go down to these real quick. I don't want to take up a lot of your time. Bruce had gone through, he was the master of masters here, and went through that climate assessment tool and came out with some results on it until we really realized that it wasn't absolutely crucial for this application.
Yep.
But we did, I'm just going to skip these. We picked out, I think we did finally come up with 5 or maybe 4 or 5 that we had to choose from here in terms of what we thought would
those looked pretty good to me. What you came up with, I thought were on target. I know you had a note in there about getting some more info on the air quality piece.
Right.
But I think you were pretty much spot on with, what you were looking at.
Okay. So this is all the stuff here in yellow is Bruce, I'll turn it over to you. This is basically the results of the climate assessment tool that you went through. Is that correct, Bruce? You're muted, Bruce. Sorry.
And Bruce, that's the RMAT tool, right? You went in, you made an account.
Correct.
You identified your spot. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Correct. The only thing that some of the questions related to the school structure and when it was built and all of that, I need to verify that data. But the end result of what I put in identified flooding and heat risk, and flooding risk was 0.2% percentile. So it showed up as a red, but in reality, it's not a high indicator for us. Whereas the heat risk was significant, being in the 90th percentile. And so I think that really gives a lot of credence to this application. And I didn't know whether sort of editing what I submitted on that tool and submitting it as a supplementary document, even though it's not required, might be helpful because it truly highlights in red the problem. Or we could just identify that information and insert it here without inserting the tool itself.
Yeah. The language is really, I went back and looked at it again. It's really poorly written. Because part of it says if you're doing a planning grant, which this is, you don't need to worry about RMAP. But then it says if you're doing a planning grant and you're identifying a specific structure, you do need it. So I think I would err on the side of, since you've done it, including it.
Okay.
Because too much information is probably not a bad thing. Okay. And then in addition to that, I mean, so you've got that. So that's great. I did not look at this area for example in the like the CDC climate and or the CDC heat and health index, but you've got a lot of good data in there already with what you just had in that application. So I think you're in pretty good shape in terms of making. You do have the CDC.
We do have the CDC in here too.
There. Sorry, I missed that. I looked at it real quick. I think you've got a lot of good info. So I mean, I think you're in good shape there, and I would tend to say attach it and and see where it takes you.
So a semantic difference.
Yes.
On the application, there's the 2 checkboxes that lead you down the pathway of mandatory CRS versus not mandatory.
Right.
Which do you recommend?
I would say let's go back to that.
Because we had checked no.
So right
Yeah.
here.
I mean, I think it's a,
It is a rep. I don't know how you define
But
adding air conditioning to an existing building, whether
yeah,
that's called a
yeah,
retrofit or some other term, but
You would call that a retrofit.
but
okay.
I think the
Yeah.
challenge, guys, what we're asking for in this grant is the feasibility study. We're not asking for the
for an
implementation of
asset.
anything
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
So that's where I get confused, because in the implementation thing, you definitely have to do
Yeah.
this.
Yes. No question.
But for a
Yeah.
feasibility study, I don't know. I'd favor, you know, I don't know. I was just confused myself that if we added it,
Yeah.
then they'd be looking for a whole nother set of questions that, maybe we'd
Yeah.
miss.
So I think it says, so I'm just looking at, this was page 26 of the original application.
Yeah,
I know you
something in
stripped
that
out some stuff.
crazy
It's
guideline. Yeah.
and this is number 2C.
It's right after all it's two
Yep.
something.
Yep. 2C says, does your project focus on a specific site and include a constructed physical asset in any project phase, new building, new infrastructure, or redevelopment, retrofit, major maintenance of an existing structure? And it talks about dam removals. It says, yes, please complete and submit the climate resilience design standards output tool. And it says, or no, my project does not focus on a constructed physical asset.
So the project is the feasibility study. The project is not doing the results of the feasibility study.
Yeah.
But
That's
part
where
of that,
I'm
where
confused.
where I'm confused is in all the other information that they provide about this grant, and all the nature-based solutions. The only nature-based solution that we have is that we're considering adding rooftop solar to offset energy demands of our cooling center. We don't have any of the whole category, so we're not adding pollution, but we're and that's the only thing. So I I think the no answer is for people who are doing um, uh, maybe part of the flooding remediations that could be done, tree planting, more environmental green-based solutions than remediating a structure. And I if it anyway, I'll defer.
Yeah. I'd like to toss it back to the larger group here at Fuss and O'Neill and get their thought on it. Only because it's a retrofit of a specific building is the reason I think there may be there could be some value, to including it. It's definitely not. It's definitely a type 1 project. It's a planning assessment.
Right. We had it as
capacity.
type 1 for
Yeah,
sure. I just
no
wanted to check
question,
that.
it's a type 1. Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
for sure. Whether or not there's value to including it. I'll circle around, Bruce, to your question on nature-based solutions. So for nature-based solutions, what they're really kind of talking about are more things like green infrastructure, adding canopy,
Right.
when folks do living shorelines or restoration
Yeah.
type projects.
Mhm.
Now, what you could, I mean,
Just to
and I'm
note,
not
what's on the screen is what we'd answered earlier in the application for that.
right. And I'm not really sure. So their big push, MVP has had a push on nature-based solutions for a number of years. You could, and I don't want to, introduce a new thing that you don't want in your project, but what you could do is, because you're looking at one site, is you could kind of do, and we could, a consultant could do a sort of screening. There's two things that come to mind. One is screening of a site of the school site to say, are there opportunities to introduce green infrastructure that could reduce pavement because of the concern around, pavement kind of, throwing back heat right onto a building that can drive up the ambient temperatures in the summer. That's one possibility. The other possibility would be looking at something like, how could you add kind of thermal comfort, what I would call quote unquote thermal comfort to if there's a playground, and I don't remember from the aerial, but looking at, are there opportunities for cooling at that playground, a shading,
Yes.
Right.
other things.
Yeah, there's
So
lots of play fields out back. Yeah.
yeah, so
My son would love that. I mean,
we've
it's
seen
really hot.
yeah, we've seen some uptick in that, and because it's at a school, it's an easy tie-in that can kind of get to the nature-based solutions piece of like, okay, is there an opportunity to add in nature-based solutions
Yeah.
that would provide some sort of cooling?
Yeah.
It could be, kind of maybe potentially a small line item, but it might kind of check the box for nature-based solutions.
I like that.
Do you
I
like
really
that?
like
Okay.
that too. That makes
And
a lot of sense.
Okay, and I can talk to our folks here because we just did something similar, uh created some language for another project for another community. Not an MVP grant, it was different. It was in North Carolina actually, so totally different location. But with that idea of this, like, you know, adding, making playgrounds more comfortable. And anybody who's had their kids say, I can't get on that slide, it's just way too hot, knows what I'm talking about. Or, these playing fields that have no shade, right? So trying to assess, is there an opportunity to use nature-based solutions to look at existing, especially around the school,
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
about the parents that are sitting there watching the games in sweltering heat. The picnic tables that are outside that is so hot.
Yeah, what could you do there to start to, like, introduce something? So
that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me and I'll go back and talk to, that would be just like another line item. And that could also be an opportunity for more engagement around, like, hey, what are your needs? Kind of, it could tie in with that whole, heat and health and kids being vulnerable, and so okay. All right, that's good.
No, that sounds good. So you're going to check on both whether we should, just summarize that tool or add it. I think there might be a place at the end for other attachments. Most of these have got, prescribed, you got to have letters of support and other things that have got to go with this, but there may be a spot where we could throw in, even if we just converted the tool into a Word document, the narrative that's in here, because I'm not seeing a question where we can add this. And I don't know if you know from your experience with the application, a lot of these applications, when you get into them online, they actually have word limits per answer. Do you know if this one does?
I believe this one's all uploads. So you'll create a PDF that can't be larger than 15 pages, and you'll upload that, and then you'll upload attachment B. And then I believe, and this is what I want to check with my other colleagues that are working on stuff, I believe there's another, like any other kind of thing, because you'll have to upload your letters of support and all those things. So, and I think now it's the case where fortunately you can start and you can come back to it. You don't have to sit and do it in one spot.
That's the other problem with these things.
Right.
I know.
So that's another good thing, is if you have to put it down and grab something, you can. So, but I'll check on that. Let me check on that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, great.
So
I really appreciate the suggestions that you had about the community engagement aspects, like how we can provide education. I'm actually pulling up some examples of what Northampton puts out when they open up a cooling center, and it's about occupational safety, heat stress. There's a lot of good information in here. So I definitely think we could kind of give ourselves credit for that and work on getting that information out.
I'm gonna I can send you some other resources too, Caitlin. I mean, the advantage is usually we don't have people who have health and public health backgrounds at the table for this. So, I mean, this is like the opposite situation where we've got like a ton of knowledge and can connect that. But I have some other resources too that I'm happy to, I'll toss in an email and send over.
Great.
There's some stuff from Yale. There's some other things too. And the state put out a bunch of materials too within the last year or two that you may have already seen. So there's a lot out there, more than ever, fortunately. So I could do some of that. Okay.
All right.
That's great.
Why don't we talk about the environmental justice community section a little bit here?
Yeah.
So we're a tough
one.
We're a town that doesn't fit neatly into anything.
I have the same problem, and I live in Belchertown, so we have the same problem. We're like double your size, but we don't have a identified census tract. So we've described it as just kind of in the way that, obviously we have folks who are part of a larger EJ population. They're just not all in one census block.
Yeah.
So what we've done is exactly this, which is focus on the fact that there are vulnerable communities. There are, in your case, you've pointed out you have the aging population, you have low income. I think this might be a case because it sounds like you're already familiar, and I think reference it somewhere else. Some of the, the state tools around some of the population characteristics, if there's any of that related to like disability or asthma prevalence or any of that data that you might be able to pull in as well. I mean, I would say too, kids obviously definitely under 5, but even, teenage
Yeah.
kids are potentially vulnerable in this case. So you've got the priority populations, you just don't have a tidy kind of EJ census block that some other
Right.
communities
Yeah.
have. So
I have reached out also to the principal just to ask if she has any disaggregated data about the school kids population. I don't
yeah,
have a sense of, how many, non-English, as a
right.
first language learners we might have or anything like that at
Yep.
the school.
Yep.
So she's going to try and get me whatever she have. I'm not
Okay.
sure how much that'll be, but
Yeah.
How
so
about
there
an
was,
educational component as far as networking with the region of
Mhm.
informing the surrounding communities of the availability of this resource that was not previously available? So there may be an educational tool component to reach out to the region that does have EJ significance, like Westfield, like East Hampton. So I'm not sure how to word that in here, but
Mhm.
while we don't offer it, I mean, this community doesn't have much EJ significance,
yeah,
but we could focus on reaching out to communities and say, we are available or potentially available if you're in need
Mhm.
for
yeah.
And we
I
also
collaboration.
work with surrounding town seniors as well. Like towns from seniors from surrounding towns often come to our senior center. So I wonder if
right.
that's worth mentioning as well.
I think that's what I was starting to say right up in here
Hmm.
about oh, maybe
Hmm.
it was somewhere here. It might have been in the community one. There was something about I mentioned Huntington, towns that are even tinier than Southampton.
Okay.
I mean, the trouble in a way with, both East Hampton and Westfield have already got at least 2, if not more, cooling centers in their towns. They exist. So
Yep.
you know, I don't know what our message would be to them,
Mhm.
because I think we want to focus on our people as much as we can. But
Mhm.
anyway, I'll just scroll down here. So
Yeah.
we do have 2 community programs that help track seniors in particular, in terms of their basic welfare. This is in conjunction with the senior center and the police department,
Mhm.
which is both um, winter wellness in particular. So that ties into some of the stuff we were saying before. And then one of the things that I've been talking about with the senior center is that they would like to be trying to do a little bit more knowledge. We're pretty sure that we've got a lot of seniors around town that don't even come to the senior center. Many of them may live alone,
Mhm.
have very, very limited, social networks now.
Right.
And we don't really have a good sense of how how much of a problem that is. We're thinking it's bigger than what
Yeah.
we know.
Yep.
And so the senior center has been, we've been talking a little bit about how we might do some sort of a survey to try and get at that a little bit better. How do
Mhm.
people cope in a terribly hot day? If they
Yep.
do they at least have a fan? Do they, probably don't have a generator, but and maybe not an air conditioner in most places around here, in the older homes especially,
Right.
and older residents. But how do they cope during those days? And just to understand the extent, I guess, of the risk that they're under. Not sure what we do about it, but I think it would deepen our
Yeah.
knowledge as a town.
Well, I think it would, and it may also give you some idea of, a lot of MVP looks to build on. So in theory, let's say you're awarded this grant, you go through this process. you'd then use this as a springboard to figure out, okay, how do we get funding for this? And does some of it come from MVP? Does some of it come from, Chris is probably more familiar with some of the like the energy related grants or opportunities there. It's all like this building process. So if you collect this data, that's really hard to get other than what you're talking about, doing of actually asking people directly, like, what are they doing? Do they even have a fan? Like, how are they, how are they coping? Then you can use that to inform. You can also, as part of that, figure out what would keep people away from a cooling center. Is it because they can't bring their pet? Is it because they have no transportation? Is it because they have certain medical issues that they're, uncomfortable with being in a large space with other people? I mean, who knows? So you could get a little bit more granular on like what are some of the concerns that could then help to inform how you do, kind of how you organize a cooling center. What do you offer? What kind of programming? Do you have to have transportation to really make it work? All those things. So I think you could sort of frame it as part of the process of how you identify feasibility. There's definitely the mechanical feasibility that that Chris will be focused on understanding, but then there's also the social infrastructure, right? Of how do you build that to make it successful.
Okay. So anyway, there's a start on the EJ, but there's more to do on this one too.
So I think, so I'll give you a couple, like just off the top of my head kind of things that could be, part of that for C and D. So what I would say you could do is you could, we've done a couple things on this. One is kind of doing those experience surveys that we talked about of getting people to like participate in kind of visioning what a cooling center would look like for them. So asking them like, oh, what types of activities would you want to see there? That can help you to, see what you want to do. You can add some budget to frankly incentivize people to do that through either like, if you do this, you'll be entered to win a whatever gift card, pick your local grocery store or your, some place that folks go to. Same thing with like parents involved in recreation or, caregivers involved in like parks and rec stuff. What would help them? What would be, kind of doing that kind of outreach where there's something, I don't want to say something in it for the people to participate, but that's pretty common. You're asking people to give you information, to give you their time. So you can do something like that. Obviously, Chris Wilk is going to be in the, he's going to be crunching the numbers and kind of looking at the data and the equipment. But I think these other pieces that are a little bit softer, so to speak, give you a sense of how do you make this successful. And that's going to be important too, because you're going to need both, both pieces. And then what was the very last question? I might have had something on that too. No, not that one. The last one on the
one up above.
EJ. One up above.
How does it increase the resiliency?
Yeah, so I think for the priority populations, it can do this in two ways. One is if you educate them about understanding the impacts of heat-related illness, they become more resilient to act on their own behalf, right? Like they recognize in their friends, their family members, hey, they're not doing well. I need to intervene here. I need to call for help. So there's kind of a personal resilience that you build to heat. But then there's also, of course, obviously a community-wide resilience to be able to, respond if there is this kind of heat emergency. And that also in turn reduces the strain on your first responders, your public health infrastructure, and that builds resilience to the community to deal with other problems. Because we all know like the worst thing is when you have like, like I think Caitlin mentioned, you have some event and you lose power, right? So now you've got cascading things to deal with. And this can kind of, this can help kind of build that resilience so that it takes the strain off of other things that might have, like healthcare, for example, might be dealing with.
Okay. Those are some good thoughts we can come back around to. And then other things on community engagement. What did I have? These were just Yeah.
Yep.
Let me go back to the question here. Da, da, da. What engagements will occur or be funded during the project? And they need to be put into the budget. So, and these were just ideas looking at the couple of attachments they had in the guidance
Yep. And
about,
this might be
yeah.
your place for engagement around, recognizing the sign, the signs, right? So there's two things I can think of. One would be that whole idea around the heat and health side, right? And how do you engage seniors? How do you engage kids? The other piece could be, and now I'm gonna like drag Chris Wilk into this with no warning, would be that you could have a little bit more awareness. There's a big emphasis on, here in the Commonwealth for young people to understand what are the opportunities, what are the workforce opportunities in clean energy, in, kind of in this space. So maybe there's an opportunity to kind of tie in learning around, okay, what are heat pumps? How do heat pumps work? I don't know, Chris, Chris Wilk, if you've encountered that yet in any of your other projects.
Oh, I love heat pumps.
So that could be an opportunity too to weave in some sort of like information, like something that could kind of teach the community about these other opportunities for heating and cooling that don't burn fossil fuels. Heat pumps being one of them. So that could be another. I'm just tossing out like things that we've either seen or done or like thought about in different ways.
And I'm writing it all down in the meeting
Okay.
minutes. So just know that we are.
That's great. Yeah.
And I'm trying to do a little bit too.
like,
Tell me if I put that down correctly. Workforce about less dependence on fossil fuels, is that? Okay.
Basically, like what how do you get to be, I know Chris is a passive house certified designer, like how do you get to do that, like what is mechanical engineering, how do you get to design these things, or how do you get to install them, like there could be some opportunities for like that kind of learning too, as well as learning about, okay, what do I need to know about heat to take care of myself when the weather's hot, because
or just like general indoor air quality and why ventilation is very important in sick building syndrome.
Yeah, there are these cool, so I'm stealing this idea, and it's been used all over the place, but I recently saw a talk about this in Detroit where they specifically did, and Chris Wilk, you may have heard of this, or others may have as well. And this was more related to wildfire stuff, where people will take basically it's like a furnace filter, I think, and attach it to a box fan. And it's kind of a quick homemade sort of air filter if you have an air quality event going on. If you wanted to get I don't know, if you wanted to go out on a limb and do it, you could do something like, okay, we're going to buy 50 box fans and filters, and people can sign up for this event where they're going to learn how to make this at home.
Good idea.
I'm pretty far out there on the list.
You're really going out there.
I'm just going. I'm just freestyling now. So we'll see if any of that. But there's good. That's been done before. There's good resources. There's good instructions to do that kind of stuff. It can get people out and thinking about the topic.
All of your suggestions are really good, and maybe we can circle back to the 3 goals that need to be identified and build in community education as one of the goals, or how to integrate all these other benefits as one of the primary goals that we want to get out of this feasibility study.
Right. So this was one of the possible goals.
There we go.
So,
yeah. So maybe just expanding.
So we can expand on that maybe.
Yeah. And I think, talking with Chris, Chris Wilk a little bit about, budget, and I don't know, we've talked about some additional stuff, maybe looking at other parts of the school, but I think, Chris, you were feeling like that was going to land somewhere. Tell me if I'm right, in like more like the $15,000 to $20,000 range for a study.
Yeah, and depending on like how many times I would need to visit the school, know, and kind of more specifics of the scope, if there are plans available for HVAC design drawings. I'm sure that there are, because it's a public school. Having that be available would be a huge help.
So how much were you saying? Sorry?
About 15 to 20 in that range.
That's it for the study?
Yeah.
for feasibility study, focusing on HVAC. And then we'll have to see what else would need to be involved for, Diane's involvement for helping with, other aspects of it.
Yeah. So if we want to look at the playground piece, I can get some scope items for that attachment B and like a rough cost for that. And then on the engagement, I think you should think about, and I mean, there are communities where we come in and we help you do all the engagement, and there are communities that are in great shape and they're like, just do the technical stuff, folks, and we don't need you. So you can think about that, what you think you really need help with, and how do you set aside, like, okay, do you want to set aside, $1,000 to buy box fans and filters? Do you want to, you can think about some of those line item things. Do you want to set aside, $500 to buy gift cards to give out to people? But we're happy to help you with the engagement piece if you want help with that, or we're happy to just do the technical pieces.
Yeah.
Like
well, I'm speaking from the select board point of view, and all of us that are probably wearing multiple hats on multiple committees, I think we would welcome any help that you would be willing to do with us. I mean, I think that would be fantastic, honestly.
Okay.
I just know that we're a very engaged town in many ways. I mean, those of us who are engaged in the sort of the day-to-day running of the town and various committees that make all that happen is just built on volunteers, but people are stretched pretty thin. Yeah. And so I think any extra help would be welcome. So just one thing on the lowest amount I think for this grant is 25,000. So we would definitely have to build in, categories or chunks of something.
You'd get more than what I'm thinking. So what I can do, Chris has a pretty, I think, good view of like where you're headed, right, with your scope items and then the cost. And then what I can do is I'll talk to our for lack of a better word, playground thermal comfort playground folks. I'll get in kind of a ballpark from them and some scope language. And then on the resilient and like the engagement events, we can give you a couple line items and some pricing. But my gut feeling is that, probably for around 50, you could get a lot of what you want. And honestly, that would put you that would, I think, make you attractive to MVP to fund you, because it's your first action grant. It wouldn't be a massive ask. Because they have folks coming in for like hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Or more. Sometimes if they're doing land acquisition, it's like
exactly
$500,000.
Well, looking at some of the sample grants that they funded in the past, I mean, I know I was looking at them and feeling like we're just not stretching our imagination enough.
Like go up there, and that's and that's fine. So I think I think you could have a nice cohesive sort of goal that you want to get at. You want to understand if you can do a cooling center. In the meantime, you get to build in some other resilience. You're kind of using the school as a focal point for it, but even if for some reason you go through this exercise and the decision is, hey, we can't, it doesn't make sense for us to do this, it's going to be too costly from a capital expenditure procedure, down the road. Right. Maybe that then informs your next, other community building you build, your safety complex or your community, that you build on a certain, something. And in the meantime, people know a little bit more about how to take care of themselves and how to take care of, their neighbors and family. So that there's a win there. Too.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. I like the two-prong approach. I mean, I think I've certainly been focusing much more on the, the cooling center idea, but this whole community engagement and just general education of the broader community, I think is a great idea. So yeah, I think that's fine. So where do we've got basically a week before this application is due. So what's reality here? I mean, are we in the ballpark that we think we're going to be able to pull this off, or are we is this something for practice for next year?
I think you're a lot closer. I'll be really candid with you folks. You're a lot closer than I thought you were from when I talked to you, Chris, a couple days ago. I was like, ooh, I wonder, but you've got a lot of good stuff in here. I think it's a question of just tweaking up a few things. Obviously, that attachment B is kind of a, it's a little bit of a beast because you've got to like put all this stuff in and basically take your scope and put it in there. but Chris Wilk and I were talking about that before we got on this call. So we
Yeah.
can start to build out what we think would make sense as a scope and leave in some placeholders. And then
Sure.
if I plan to get that to you, I mean, what do you think on your end, Chris?
Oh, so you need this one by next Friday?
Has to be submitted Friday at 2.
Submitted Friday.
So back off a couple
Yeah, so
days
how about
from
Wednesday sometime? Is that fine?
Does that give you guys okay? And yeah, and what I can do is build in the other pieces. If you want to tighten up your narrative, what you've got here, and then after you've made whatever changes, if you want to send it to us again,
send it back around.
We'll be happy to like say, oh, maybe mention this, or hey, what about that?
Sure.
But you've got a lot of good info in here.
Okay.
And MVP is pretty good. They understand you're not Boston, you're not Cambridge. You don't have the same capacity to generate the same, do the same kind of work, generate the same kind of stuff. So,
well, I wonder, do you have a sense of how often or how much Western Mass even gets, looked at in these applications? Are there a fair number from this area?
It's interesting. I mean, Belchertown's been pretty successful. I'd like to think, Fuss and O'Neill support was sort of part of that. We had some really good projects. We've had some ongoing projects for them. And that's been helpful. We've seen stuff, what I don't think we've seen as much of is the smaller towns in Western Mass, the under 10,000s. So, Pittsfield's been successful with some stuff, obviously like, Springfield, Munson, Northampton, East Hampton, they've all been pretty successful. But I think you've never had an action grant and you're not asking for a lot. So I think it's a very tight, concise ask that you have. It's not kind of like, oh, we're going to do, whatever. So I think, you're not in bad shape. You never know because you don't know who the competition is, right?
Sure,
so it's hard to tell, but I think also the idea of pushing on the fact that this not only addresses the resilience piece, the adaptation piece of like, okay, how do people cope with higher heat, but also looks at solutions on the decarbonization side is nice, because a lot of times what doesn't happen with, like, for example, the projects that address flooding, that's great. They're addressing flooding and they're addressing the resilience piece. They really struggle to bring in any kind of like decarbonization. They just can't do it. So this project has an opportunity to also advance that goal, which is huge for the Commonwealth. So so I think that that kind of gives you it's a good framing for the project.
Yep. So I think out of the required attachments, there's basically obviously the budget. It's a separate thing. These letters of commitment, which would be like from the school, the Council on Aging, maybe the police department. Right. I don't know. Maybe Northampton, Kate, for the the health group up there, and then it drops down K, number 7. There is a printout on the rural town, which we would qualify, and then looking at number 8 here again, it's phrased differently every time I read it. I swear. Yeah. So at any phase. So that's the first time I think I saw at any project phase. So that would tell me that we should put the super tool in there after all that.
Yeah, I think I would err on the side of doing it. I think if they say, oh, you don't really need it, I don't think they're going to penalize you for having included it. If anything, I think they're going to say, okay,
that's what I wasn't
really
sure.
Hard.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like, oh, they attached it, kick them out. Right. It's more likely to be the other direction, where if you say, oh, I'm doing I'm replacing a culvert, and you don't include it, that they're going to say, hey, wait a minute, you're doing construction. You didn't.
It sounds good.
Yeah.
No, I think that's probably fair. So then, Bruce, so you've got a couple of things that you want to verify on that tool to just tweak it a little bit, right? And then the CDC information you pulled out is different from the tool. So that is something that we would need to put into the narrative somewhere.
Right.
Right? Okay. Right. Yeah.
That CDC information I thought was fascinating and scary.
Yeah,
it's great. Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't say it's great in that, like, oh, it's great, but it's great information. Yeah, helpful. It's helpful.
Very good. Great. Okay, so
awesome.
I think Diane and Christopher. So we, we'll hear back from you we'll try to get you something What do you think, guys? Maybe by Monday night or something?
Monday. Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
Monday because then I can look at it
And
this
then,
weekend.
we maybe would
Okay.
hear back from you on Wednesday, and then
Yeah.
pray tell
And,
this website. I don't know. I haven't looked at the website to see how complicated it is to enter stuff, but
and I'll check with like I said, my colleagues here, if I can get you some line items, some stuff in that budget around the
yeah,
playground
we've
or
done
along
nothing with the budget. So
the community engagement. I can give you that to, I can try to get you that ahead of Wednesday because those are a little bit
okay.
simpler. Okay, great. Yeah, that's really cool. Like fingers crossed, you guys would be
Well,
like
thank you
great.
for your support and
Yeah,
encouragement.
yeah,
That's really
yeah.
helpful.
No, this is great. This is I
All
know
right.
Chris and I are on a committee together internally here at Fuss O'Neill, and it's really we love this work because it's really doing good in the world, and we feel that really strongly. So
Yeah.
so it's exciting to see communities, trying to, get
Well,
ready for what's coming
and
and
honestly,
deal
it's
with
great
what's
to live
here.
in a state that appreciates it too,
Oh yeah.
given the world. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great.
yeah.
Okay, good. Well,
So
we'll be
Diane
in
and
touch.
Christopher, thank you much.
Thank
If
you.
Kate and Bruce, can you
Yeah,
hang in for a
thank you.
minute? And
Sure.
okay.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks
guys.
so
Very much
much. Take care.
appreciated.
All
Yeah,
right.
Have a
nice
great
meeting you
Bye-bye.
weekend.
all.
Good
Yikes.
job, Chris. You
Woo!
Yeah.
brought in the VPs.
Oh, I wish I'd found them 2 weeks ago.
I know, but that was a really good thought.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you recorded it.
Yes.
I've been taking notes, so just so you know, I've been they might not be perfectly
Yeah.
like edited, but what I'll do is right after this, I'll share them with you. So
Yeah.
most of it is captured in the notes, and
Right.
then if not, it'll hopefully at least trigger you to
Yeah.
remember what the discussion was about.
Right. So I'm thinking, yeah, and so I relying on your notes and the recording. I wasn't adding too much into the document. But what I'm thinking is this document now, how about if we put this document that we just looked at back into Google Docs and work off of this one? Because
Yeah.
it
Sure.
got rid of a lot of the extraneous stuff. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I misread your email and I added I couldn't hear
Yeah, that she
the
was
other
soft
folks
for a
in it.
bit, but it helped. When they have their earbuds in, I think it's hard to hear
Yeah,
them sometimes.
their volume was really low for me. Um, uh, in the second phases of this, there are some valued questions, certain point value assigned to the grant. Like, did you include nature-based solutions? And yes or no? And if not, give us your reasoning why.
Yeah.
I added information in that area
Okay,
in a
then I maybe
different
missed.
color.
I'll go back in before I send this around. Then, because I just saw that green one about the forest when I went back in right before this meeting. So I'll go back in and see if I see your
Yeah.
other. I didn't,
Just to make sure you don't delete
No,
what
I
I
won't.
put
I'll
in.
go. I'll try not to. I tell you, I
Okay.
hate this format. No, I'll go back in and be sure. Kate, you didn't work in anything much this morning, right? So
Not this morning, no.
yeah. So
I was
Bruce, you've
meeting this
got
morning.
probably two areas in the nature-based only, or somewhere else.
Um, there were two areas in there, and they're color coded. I
Yeah.
think I used green.
Yeah. Okay. I pulled one out for sure, but I'll look for the
Yeah.
second one, and before I send this around, I will go back in and make sure I've caught that from you, because I can see
Okay.
it's your edit.
Um, do we have time to spend 5 or 10 minutes on this climate resource tool or whatever it's called? Because the questions that I got stymied at, I didn't realize there were actually drop-down menu of
Oh.
4 choices. And I think, Chris, you may know the answer to these.
Yeah.
And if you give me capacity to share,
I
I
think.
can pull up
Hold
that
on.
tool.
Hold on. I think. Let me just double check. Go ahead.
All right.
Yeah, if this is Southampton trivia about the school, I don't know, but it was built in the 50s. I know that much. But we can also look on the Norris website. You might find some answers there too.
Yeah, so here's the project. My mouse is a little bit slow here. I like Diane's suggestion of expanding the focus to not just the physical structure of the
Oh, I
school.
do too. I
Yeah.
love that whole idea of the playgrounds and the shade and the
Have you ever sat
absolutely.
on that back pavement when your kid's doing an activity? It is so hot. Like it
Yeah,
is and they play outside on that playground. They
yeah,
for after school program and
yep,
Christopher sometimes outside is just
yep.
pouring sweat.
Well, and they've got, I don't know if they still, that they've had a garden there. Do they still have chickens there? I don't know. They've got all sorts of stuff going on up
Wow.
there. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like on the side of the school, but you
right.
think about they have like a little shaded area, but
Yeah,
it's not huge, and the bigger playground doesn't have any shaded structures.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
think that's a great option. I didn't think of that as nature-based solutions because they're like I would still think of them as like she said canopy, but canopies are constructed too. So I thought of nature-based solutions as like restoring ecosystems.
Yeah.
yeah, me too.
But,
Looks
planting
like,
shade trees is,
yeah, I'm
something,
having a buffering problem, and I don't know how to resolve it, to get into the tool.
maybe go back out and try it again or,
Um,
or,
yeah, let me just copy this. I've been working on so many things and trying to get educated, that it's, um, I have about 20 different tabs open on my browser.
I
And then
have
I lose track of where I was.
yeah.
Uh, come on, I want to. Okay.
No, and thank you for taking the time and going through this whole tool too, because that's the challenge with a lot of these things when they put these tools out, they aren't the most user friendly and it takes a while to even understand what they're trying to get you to do.
I really want to appreciate Bruce. You've really done a lot of work on this, and
Yeah,
we're very
absolutely.
Well,
grateful to have you here and have you so
Yeah.
engaged and participating. I mean, they say that many hands makes light work, and then I think in these
well,
instances, more hands isn't always better, but having the right hands is
Yeah,
well,
always
thank
better.
you.
And I feel like you've been a great asset to this group.
yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
I mean, you too,
I
Chris. You too, Chris. But I'm just saying, like,
No, no. As a newcomer to the group, I know Bruce, you don't often take credit for your contribution here, but we do appreciate it.
um I this is the first time that I sort of felt like I don't know, if I was going to help, I needed to just dive in and start to read and figure it all out.
Well, I think
So
you dove into the deep end on this one.
yeah. Now, are you, I don't think I'm sharing the right screen. You don't see the climate resilience tool, do you?
no,
We
we
see the tool reporting workflow.
Oh, okay, great. Um, oh,
Yep, we got a map coming up of some sort.
yeah. Um, what was my project number? Or
Five something.
South. I'm
Forget.
hoping this will autopilot. Yeah, it did. Okay. So I was looking at input or clarifying.
Yeah.
So how well can you read this? Do I need to
Could be a
magnify it?
little bit bigger if possible, for me
Yeah.
anyway.
I'm good. I mean,
Does that help, Chris?
Yes,
perfect.
thank you.
Okay, so I think, well, I can change the cost. I'm going to drop this down to 50,000.
I guess for now, I'm surprised, but yeah.
Yeah.
And then we
And
want to change that name to community, what, cooling and air quality?
cooling and air quality. Air quality and centers after that. I don't know whether it's capping me off, on words, but okay. It's just the other thing I didn't realize is each of these lines you have to save individually. And
Yeah.
so I did it once and lost it and I had to go back.
Yep. And usually at the end of
Um,
every page, you probably have to save too, right?
no, there was no page save. It's just on the individual line item.
Oh, okay. All right.
So is climate resiliency a core objective of the project? Um, the only way this is a yes is by meeting the energy demand with solar and backup battery.
That's like the piece that I'm like, I feel like if we're
It's a
looking
yes,
at a
no.
couple rooms, and I don't know if you guys saw the policy that I circulated, and I certainly didn't want to mention it on the phone with or on the call with Fuss and O'Neill, but apparently there was a policy about a cooling center at the senior center. And I was like, didn't know
What?
that.
I didn't see that. What'd you
Oh.
circulate?
It was right before the meeting
Okay,
that
I didn't.
there was an existing policy. Charlie shared it with me of, and the frustrating part is I've talked to Jerry multiple times about just like where these policies exist in town. And of course, Charlie's the one who just pulls it up, no problem, and sends it. But there was a policy, and that's why I was like, do we leave it generic? Because if we're not going to get solar out of the deal, I felt like the school seems less important, right? Like part of this was because we don't have generator backup power for any part of the school.
Right. And I did see that document and it came through, and I think that's helpful to know that it's there, Kate.
Yeah, no,
But we
I'll
don't
look
have
at
that as a plan. Like that's not a plan. I mean,
Right.
it's a policy, but I've never even heard that before. So
I'll have to look at that. That sounds new to me too. So I'll take a look at that. I didn't see that right before the meeting.
And then and I misread this briefly. I
mean,
think this is a climate resiliency core objective. Is this project being submitted as part of a state capital planning process? That's no.
no. I think
Being
back on the
submitted-
climate resiliency, certainly the climate resiliency education, as Diane
Yeah.
kind of expanded, I'd say
Right.
yes. Yeah.
So the brief summary that I had on this, perform a feasibility study to assess developing the Norris School as a community cooling and air quality
Mhm.
air quality center in the event of an extreme heat event with or without accompanying widespread loss of power. Having a cooling center will improve Southampton's climate resilience and help protect vulnerable populations. Rooftop solar to be considered.
or may be installed.
Yeah, I'd say maybe, I was in the other one, I said it investigated as a, as an option or something, because we can't say that we're going to install this. Yeah. As an option to offset. Yeah.
Okay.
To run the center. Just take out cooling there. Just to run the center.
Run the center, correct.
Yeah. Sure.
I love this on the fly editing.
I know.
It's never easy. So I think that fills the first step. And then is the primary purpose of this project ecological restoration? The answer is no. And then on all of these items, does the project provide the following benefits? Flood, storm damage, reduce storm damage,
No.
recharge of groundwater. None of those. The only one that it came to was prevents pollution only with
air
solar.
quality.
Okay, that's right.
But that's if you're going to do the solar and you don't know that yet. So,
but the same thing with
air quality would be
preventing
the filtration too, right? Or the ventilation.
Yeah. So air quality, yeah, true. That's with the filtration at school.
Let me try to. Where's the edit? So, guidance, air quality.
Just click on that one. It may just toggle. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think that this is not provide pollinator, providing recreation, or if we do the playground, does that provide better options for recreation?
I still think the initial intention of the project isn't going to provide recreation. It would provide shade for recreation.
I think these two are the important ones in this.
Yep.
And then we drop down to.
Wait, what's the last one? Oh, no. Okay. Cultural resources. No. Okay. That's fine. Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Does the project have a history of coastal flooding? No. Does the
No.
project have a history of flooding during extreme precipitation? I didn't know whether there are any leakage issues at the school. Does the project have a history of river flooding? I
No.
presume no. There's no change in impervious area. There are no trees that are being removed. Correct? So,
Correct.
and then project assets, one of these related to the age of the school. So, and did I change anything there? No. Sorry for bouncing around. So asset type, it's typically occupied, I put, because it's a school. But if we're talking about, I don't know whether it's semantics that heat events are likely when the school is closed, but I think we can just ignore that part and
Yeah.
I
just
think
say,
it's fine. I don't,
Yeah.
yeah.
okay. It's a school construction type. And again, the options are new construction, major repair, retrofit. It's not maintenance. It's not environmental. I think it's a retrofit, not a renovation, based on what Chris Wilk said.
I think that's fair. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah. I guess the one above, the asset subtype, why is that school primary second, or that's
Oh,
all, that
that's
wasn't a
the
choice,
option.
or?
So airport, childcare, it's a whole bunch of different
like
locations.
Oh, I
separate
see. It's
schools.
all in one list. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll save that. Where was I? Oh,
Down below. Yeah.
yeah, it bounced me up. So if we did this, when would construction start? We're doing the feasibility study. We'd have to apply for another grant. And this only accepts numeric
I think
entry.
2026 is, it just says if your project is in the pre-planning, the projected start year should be an estimate of when construction will start. So I think that's fine. It'd be great if
Okay.
we could apply next year, 2027, I think, what do you think, Chris?
Yeah,
I
no, I
think
mean, this is a yearly grant, so you're not, we're going to hear about this hopefully by the summer.
Yeah, I think
by
2026 is fine.
by
Yeah.
26 we'd have to apply for new funding. So 27 would be any kind of construction probably, right?
Correct. Well, isn't this the title of this is fiscal year 26 MVP action grant? So
That's fiscal, yeah,
fiscal year 26,
right.
but this doesn't.
So this time next year, we're still in fiscal 26, but by July 26 will be in fiscal 27. So I don't know. Yeah, that's why. Oh God.
What does it matter?
Probably not, but I think
I
it's
think we could
better
just
to
leave it as
put it
20,
at,
I mean, 2026, I think it doesn't matter.
Well, I'd go with 27 just because we'd have to go find money to do the study, honestly. But
okay, so
okay, good enough.
I'll leave it at 27. The asset useful life, so useful life, I don't know whether there's, when was the school built?
Oh boy. I'm gonna say there's a sign right out front of the school.
1926.
Not 26, no. What? Is that what you said? What'd you say?
I'm sorry, Norris School, 1964.
Something.
1964.
It says
Okay.
district, oh no, district was 4.
No.
School district. Norris School, Southampton.
So this,
1950, this is 1956 and was renovated in 96.
Right. That sounds
Okay.
right.
Which is like 30 years ago at this point.
Right.
yeah. So I don't know how to answer the question of what is the specified useful residual life of this building. And maybe if I dig around, I could call somebody related. I don't know whether there's a standard thing for municipal buildings and establish longevity. I have no idea.
I have no idea. 30 sounds good. 20 is maybe realistic. I don't know. But 25. I don't know. I mean, it's already,
But I also think that well, I don't know. If you think I'm
I
happy to
don't know.
put
I
into
think that's all right. I mean, it was
okay.
renovated already close to 25 years ago. So figure another 25 years, more renovation. I don't know.
Okay. So I'll leave that
We aren't going to
as
build one
a
anytime soon. I'll tell you that.
yeah. Um, so identify the length of time the asset can be inaccessible / inoperable without significant consequences. So I had four choices. Building may be inaccessible, inoperable more than a week after a natural hazard event without consequences. I think if it was out for a week and we're in the midst of a heat event, so of 5 days, so there would be consequences. So it's not the first option.
I think
That
1 day is perfect. I
okay,
think a week. I think that there would be consequences after a day.
okay,
I mean, kids would miss school. That's a
right,
consequence. That's a
Yeah.
consequence.
okay.
Yeah.
Geographically, identify geographic area directly affected by permanent loss or significant
Yeah.
inoperability.
Just the local
Impacts would
area.
be limited to local area. Identify the population directly served that would be affected by permanent loss of the building.
Was
And
there a drop down?
yeah, drop down less than 100, less than 1,000, less
No.
than 10,000. So
10,000, yeah.
that's correct. The next one is identify if the building facility provides services to populations that reside in EJ neighborhoods, and it does not, is what I put. Options for that are it's either yes or no.
No, I think I'd say no.
Okay. Uh, if the building is uh, became inoperable for longer than the acceptable in question one, how, if at all, would it be expected to impact people's health and safety? And the drop down on this is um, uh, not expected to result in injuries, minor impacts, moderate or severe injuries, or moderate
I
or
think
severe
minor.
impacts.
I
You
think of
like that?
severe injuries or impacts like death or like,
Well,
yeah, near death.
the next option is loss of life. So I think it's the proper one, correct?
If it's
I
longer than question one, in question one, we only put 1 day, right?
Question one. Let me go back to question one. Oh,
Question one was 1 day.
Yeah, so
That's
if
such a
it's longer
loaded
than a day,
question. But I don't
oh,
think okay, so if the school was closed, I think that that question lacks context because if the school is closed, we go to town hall or the church or like we make a different building work.
yeah, or
yeah.
if it happened on a weekend, you've got time to
But
recover, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. What'd you put, Bruce? You had moderate?
well, I put that it would be. No, I'm not at the right place. Let me scroll back down.
Because the
Sorry.
question was more than a day. So
If it was more than a day, that it would result in moderate or severe injuries or moderate or severe impacts to chronic illness. And so I'm not thinking about school day and normal school operations. I'm
yeah,
thinking summertime heat events where
Right.
it's 90 to 100 degrees for multiple days and
yeah,
there's no cooling facility. That's the mindset I had that
Yeah,
if,
yeah.
I think it's fine. You know
That's
what?
okay,
okay.
It's
I don't
not
know if
like you
there's
have
any
like
right or
an
wrong
other,
answer. Yeah,
I don't think you have like an
okay,
other descriptive section, which is kind of
yeah.
frustrating.
okay. There are no hazardous materials in the building. Um,
Hope not.
if this became inoperable for longer than a day, what impacts on other facilities, assets, or infrastructure would there be? And the options there were minor in that it wouldn't affect other structures. Um, assets, people are assets. So I don't know whether um, Moderate would be a better
Moderate.
answer.
I think it is moderate because if the school is closed for a prolonged period of time, it's gonna have it like
If we don't have a cooling center, then the
Yeah.
occupational risks, the health risks, become it's moderate as opposed to minor.
and
Yeah.
we're gonna have to
And
find somewhere else to create a like say that center was closed, we'd have to identify somewhere else in town for people to go,
Right.
which would
right.
Okay.
impact
Or
probably town hall at the church.
yeah. Or if kids were out of school, then parents might have to stay home from work or, whatever. I mean, right?
Right. Which question was that?
You're up above 30, number 8.
Number 8. Okay. Thank you. I have no idea on the cost of a school.
That sounds right.
Okay.
From what I've seen of
The
other schools lately.
Yeah. Is this a recreational facility? I said no. Um, yeah, it's not just a standalone gym. It's not a, so I think that that's fine. That was a yes,
It's only
no.
a yes or no. I wouldn't call it a recreational facility, no.
Right. What are the public or social service impacts if this building is, as a cooling center is no longer available? In the town of Southampton, we don't have another cooling center, so there'd be no alternative program and or services. Or
I
should
think
I
that's
mark
fine.
few?
I mean, it's hard. It's just so hard because there could be, you could use does the church have air conditioning or the town hall? Like, I feel like they're,
Town hall does, but not the church.
Right. Um, uh, I'll,
Not yet, anyway.
I'll, I'll leave it as, if there's no disagreement, I'll leave it as no alternative.
Yeah. There is no other
Uh,
cooling center. That's fair to say.
Right. What are the environmental impacts related to natural resources? And for this, um, there are no other, there's no flood zone, there's no other, I couldn't think of anything that would apply here. So
I
I
agree.
had it as no impact. If the facility is inoperable, what are the impacts on government services? So if we have no cooling center available, I said loss of building may reduce the ability to maintain some government services while majority of services would still exist.
yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. Um, and
I mean,
then
it's not
the
like
last,
it's not like town hall wouldn't exist. Like, and there's no
right.
remote capabilities. I feel like this is a weird tool.
Okay. And then the last question, what are the impacts of loss of confidence in government if there were no cooling center? And I ended up saying loss of confidence in government agency, not in the Commonwealth.
I think that's
Well,
fine. I mean, if
but
it's
there
so
isn't one
hot,
now. There isn't one now, so I don't know if that's a loss of confidence. It's more, I
Okay.
don't know. Is it that or reduced morale and public support? I don't know. Um,
All right. Well, this was the last of the data input, and it generated that report that I sent. And then the last step is to finalize the report. So I'll just go back and hit the save function on all of
okay.
these to make sure that if I changed one, that I'm capturing it correctly.
Yep.
But that should take care of this, and I'll send you a copy of the finalized version, so you can peruse it.
Okay. And do you have a sense why the flooding thing came out at all? That just seems weird.
Yeah, we are in. So the tool looked at one of the maps actually showed that we are in a. So it looked at percentiles, and we are in a 0.2% risk of flooding in the region of the school, and so because of that. Somehow that 0.2%, it was enough to categorize it as a risk of flooding, which doesn't, I don't see it as a real risk,
Doesn't
but
make any sense. Yeah.
the
well, I'll
90,
just say that when I'm from Westfield, and there's special design along North Main Street, which is like where the plaza is. And they have to have doors that open in Home Depot in a particular way because they have 100-year floodplain. And so there's an average of a flood every 100 years. So I imagine it's a pretty significant event when it does happen. It just doesn't happen on a regular basis. So I
yeah,
can understand why the 2% is like it may not seem like a lot, but maybe that 2% risk, like the damage that's caused by one flood in that particular area might be
But it's not even 2%, it's 0.2%, right?
Point
I mean, I don't see
2%.
how it even registers. I mean, it just, that's
I,
not a
yeah,
low-lying area of town. But anyway, so be it.
okay.
I would just leave it. Yeah, we have
Okay.
enough fish to fry.
So I'll
Okay, so
complete that.
right now we will finalize that. The theory is we will include it as one of the attachments, but we'll need to incorporate the CDC information as part of the narrative somewhere in there.
Mhm.
So, okay, and I will look for one more bit of editing that I missed on Bruce, and I'll combine that in before I send this back around. But let's work in this new document from today.
Okay. And
Yeah,
I'll
I'm
send
really
the minutes
glad. I mean,
from
Fuss and
today.
O'Neill, I mean, God, to help us with the budget even.
Yeah.
I'm just amazed. So I wish I'd thought of them 2 weeks ago. But anyway,
Are they
so be
like,
it.
so they're a consultant group that's working with the MVP planning process? Like, how did you think to reach out to them?
Because they did our planning study. And it just dawned. I've been reaching out to PVPC and getting nowhere.
I know,
And it's like,
PVPC
why
seems
not
like
reach
it's
out to
been
the people
working.
that helped us do the planning grant?
That's super smart. I mean, it'd be
So,
great to know when, like, just keep that in mind for future, because I always
yeah.
feel like we're out on
I
an
know.
island trying to solve the world's
Yeah.
problem.
Well, in all honesty, too, that culvert grant that Randall's been doing, the culvert assessment, Ty and Bond helped him do the grant application on that, and then they're the ones that are implementing the whole study. So
Mm.
I kind of think this could be a little bit similar, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. So I did set up another Zoom on Monday just in
Perfect.
case. So let's assume that, we'll tidy whatever we can do over the weekend. I know I've got stuff tomorrow morning. I'm booked for the 250th.
I have stuff all
Anyway,
week, but
whenever we can
if
get
it's
to
not
it.
working, I'll have more. I'll be able to work
Yeah.
on
No,
it.
I know you've had a crazy time too. Let's, yeah, well, I'll put this one in the Google and we'll work out of this document going forward. And let's see where we are by Monday. I'll keep the meeting for Monday. And
Okay.
hopefully we'll have enough that we can send off to Julie and Chris to look at Monday night. Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you for the good
Oy.
thought, Chris. That's really awesome. And Bruce, thank you for all
Well,
your hard work
Yeah.
on pulling
thank
this
you
together.
all, both of you. Yeah, no, great. This is multiple
Happy to
heads and
jump in.
multiple eyes together. So thanks
Hey, I'm
very
glad
much
she
for
liked my
everything.
random paragraphs that I squeezed in between the interventions. I felt reassured by that. I felt like I was writing at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, what am I even saying?
Exactly. All right. Well, I've got to run and do something real quick, but I'll get this around to you this evening for sure. Okay.
Okay.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you,
Bye.
guys.
Motion
Bye
to
now.
adjourn. Sorry.
Oh yeah, motion to adjourn. Yeah. Guess we ought to do that.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. We are adjourned at 2:34. Thank you very much, guys.
Sure thing.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.